listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. This is your host, Tim Link, and I'm so thankful you're with us today. Joining me today is my special guest, a New York Times best-selling author. He's a writer and senior editor for Sports Illustrated. It's Jim Gorant. So we're glad to have Jim back on the show. And Jim will be discussing his latest book, Wallace, the underdog who conquered a sport, saved a marriage, and championed pit bulls, one flying disc at a time. So we're all interested to find out more about Wallace and his extraordinary efforts. And we look forward to talking to Jim about the latest book. So we're going to come right back with Jim Gorant right after these messages. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Sit. Stay. We'll be right back after a short pause. Well, 4 to be exact.
Petco, where the pets go. Petco, where the pets go.
Pet Life Radio has tail-wagging, fur-flying, fabulous deals for our listeners from Petco. Get $6 off your order of $60 or more and up to 40% off the entire Petco site. That's right. But that's not all. Because you're a Pet Life Radio listener, you'll also get free shipping on your order of $49 or more. $6 off, up to 40% off, and free shipping from Pet Life Radio and Petco. To get these awesome deals, go to PetcoDeals.com. That's PetcoDeals.com.
Petco, where the pets go.
I'm not much of a reader, but I do wish I were more well-read.
There are so many great books coming out. I wish I could find a way to keep up.
Audible.com makes it easy to stay well informed and catch up on your reading simply by listening. Audiobooks from Audible turn downtime into uptime. You'll be more productive and become well read.
Now I'm able to catch up on all the great books I've been wanting to read.
With Audible, I feel smarter.
Pet Life Radio listeners, try Audible.com now and get your first 30 days of Audible Listener Gold membership plan free. And get a free audiobook. Choose from over 100,000 titles. To get this great deal, go to audibledeals.com. That's audibledeals.com.
Let's talk pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. This is your host, Tim Link. And joining me now is New York Times best-selling author Jim Gorant. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back.
We're so thankful and we're so excited about the book. I love the book, love the cover on it. Tell us a little bit about the book, Wallace.
Well, Wallace, it's sort of an outgrowth of The Lost Dogs, the last book I did, which is about the Michael Vick dog fighting case. And one of the guys I met in the process of that was a man named Rue Yuri, who adopted one of those dogs, a dog named Hector. And while I was spending some time with Rue, he started telling me about his other dog, Wallace. And Wallace was a pit bull he had adopted about 6 years previous to that, who had some behavioral issues and really high-drive dog. And in an effort to engage him, Rue sort of stumbled into the world of competitive disc competitions or frisbee competitions, and Wallace went on to become a world champion. And in the process, broke down a lot of barriers, overcame a lot of obstacles, and had an impact on the lives of many people.
Yeah, and I think it's an amazing story. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those impacts on his breed, as well as the pit bull community, as well as his family. So we'll go into that a little bit more detail in a moment. But you don't see that every day, do you? Having a pit bull as a world-class champion.
No, I mean, previous to Wallace, very few pit bulls had ever competed in it that anybody knows of. It's not a well-recorded thing, but certainly none of them ever competed as well as Wallace did. And, typically it's these faster, smaller, herding-type dogs, Border Collies and Australian Shepherds that tend to excel at the game, at the sport. And, Wallace is an anomaly out there. His pit bulls are sort of bigger and very muscly and heavy-boned and have those big heads and, they're not terribly graceful, although they are athletic, So he was definitely a strange entry in the field. And the reactions at the beginning sort of ranged from, oh, isn't that cute, and isn't that nice of you to try? And then when he started beating people, it went to a little more shock and surprise, and eventually he became accepted. And so he really set a mark there and changed a lot of opinions. And now there are a number of pit bulls that compete, and some of them do pretty well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think it's just another big kudo for the breed because, as you know, working with the Vic case and doing your great book with the Lost Dogs, the breed often is misunderstood.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, a lot of Wallace's story is about just sort of breaking down those misperceptions, and that's what this does. I mean, you think, you have a definition of a pit bull in your head, what it can and can't do, and then you see it out there, running and catching frisbees, and not only doing it, but doing it amongst the best in the world, and more than holding his own, So right off the bat, you have to change your mind. You have to rethink what you've assumed about these dogs, and it goes from there.
Absolutely. Now, the process of how this book came about, I know, as you mentioned earlier, Rue Yorey, the owner of Hector and Wallace, turned you onto the book and turned you onto what Wallace was all about. Had he already competed? Had Wallace and Rue already competed in these championships? And it was like, hey, Jim, take a look at what my other dog can do? Or was this something that you just sort of uncovered through your other research with Hector?
By the time I came on the scene, Wallace was done competing. His competitive career was over. So we went back and recreated it, really, and it was, that was a long process, but I think we did a pretty good job of making you feel like you were there. And, I'd heard his general story before. I knew of Wallace, but I didn't really know the details. And certainly when you're looking at, any sort of a story or a book, what you look for is that, that sort of great arc of the story, and Wallace had that starting from really the lowest of lows, abandoned as a puppy in a shelter where he had some behavioral issues and literally on death row, saved at the last minute by Rue and his wife Clara, and then, rising to the highest of highs, world champion. So, you go from that low to that high, that's sort of the making of a great story. But for me, to do a whole book, you need a little more than that. And then that's where, this personal story, that how Wallace impacted Rue and Clara's marriage, and then also this greater sort of societal story about pit bulls and about breed-specific legislation and a lot of these things that cut across Wallace's career and that he had an impact on. When you start adding those other layers to it, it becomes a deeper story than just a dog catching frisbees, and that's what really makes it a good book and a worthwhile book.
Now, I think when we spoke last, when The Lost Dogs came out, correct me if I'm wrong, you were initially not anticipating writing The Lost Dogs. It was more of an article and research that developed into this fantastic book. And now with Wallace's story, you have another book on hand about the same breeds and same things. Did you anticipate all this happening? Did you have this big crystal ball that this is what you wanted to do, or is it one of those other great stories of just happening?
Yeah, absolutely. It just sort of happened. And honestly, when I started out after The Lost Dogs, obviously it was an incredible experience, the success of it and the impact it had, which was very real and sort of overwhelming and humbling in a way. But I was pretty determined after that I wasn't going to write another dog book. I didn't want to become a dog writer. But then I had this conversation with Rue, and like I said, we got into all these, not only Wallace's straight up story, but then all these layers to it and the other aspects to it. And I just thought, wow, this is too good not to write. I mean, it's a great story. And so as a journalist, as a writer, I always, that's what I want to do. I consider myself a storyteller, so I'm always looking to tell a good story. And it's like, well, why am I going out and search the world for another good story? I've got one right in front of me, and I did it. So I think it came off well, and I hope people like it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great book, and we appreciate it because we can have you on this show by writing more about dogs and other animals. So,
yeah, like I wouldn't say I never wanted to write another dog book. I just didn't want to know if I wanted to do two in a row. But I think I would have gone back to it at some point, one way or the other. But the two in a row, I didn't think was a great idea. But sometimes you just have to play them the way they come out.
That's right. And like you mentioned, it's all about the story. When you have a great story, no matter really what the topics are, you got to feel compelled to write it. You got to get that message out there.
That's right.
Now, in the book, you mentioned that Wallace's story has impacted the pit bull community and public perception. Obviously, he did that through, wow, here's a pit bull that is now a flying disc champion. But what are some of the other things that he's done or you've seen in writing the book that have really made that major impact on the community?
Well, I think, as Rue, this was the first experience he had with a pit bull, really, and so he got slowly drawn into that community, and that's part of the book, too, is his development and his change and his becoming more of an activist and really taking an active role and intentionally making appearances with Wallace at places and, conventions and forums and so forth to reinforce the point of the unfairness of breed-specific legislation. one of the things they had to deal with was they couldn't go to some competitions. Whenever Wallace couldn't fly, so they drove to a lot of these competitions around the country, and they had to very carefully plan their route. Were they passing through a county or a city where pit bulls were bad, and if they stopped, could they potentially lose this dog? So here was this world champion dog that had been nothing but exemplary, and he could have been confiscated and put down strictly because of his genetics, and it sort of really, pointed up how ridiculous those things were. And then just on a more individual level, every time he went to one of these competitions, people would hear about him. They'd come over and, can I pet him? And, stuff. They often people comment, it's the first time I ever petted a pit bull, and he's so nice. He doesn't seem mean. He doesn't seem scary. And all these things that they had thought and heard, he's just right before your eyes. They're being undone. And, it's sort of, like you say, it's like changing minds one disc at a time. It's every catch, every person, it sort of turns the tide a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm sure Rue and Clara, through talking with them, they probably never imagined it, taking it to this level. They were probably wanting something fun and interesting for Wallace to do that now is manifested in something even greater. Yeah,
well, the funny part is that they didn't really intend to keep him. They didn't want him to be put down because they thought he was being put down for unfair reasons, but their intention was to foster him and find a home for him. And they actually got him into weight pulling because they thought that weight pull crowd would be a good place to find potential adopters. This the kind of people who are, into the stronger dogs, they know how to work with them. They're interested in what he could do, and that might be a good place to find potential adopters. And they were doing frisbee with one of their other dogs, and just by chance, Wallace went after the frisbee, and he just loved it. He was a natural, and he was just such intensity and such drive, and there was nothing he loved better to do than catch those frisbees. And even when they started, they thought, well, that's a nice thing to keep him busy and let him burn some energy. But he'll never excel at it for all the same reasons. He's a pit bull and he's not fast enough, doesn't jump high enough, and all these things. But once it got going, there was no stopping him.
And Wallace proves him wrong every day, it seems like. Yeah, it's fascinating what you had said about not being able to take him into certain counties or certain areas because of the ordinances and that for the pit bulls. And, I've seen that also. I've had friends and colleagues that one in particular I can think of that's recently going to be joining the military. And he has a family and wants to move on base, but he also has a pit bull that's part of that family. And found out recently he cannot take the pit bull on to base housing, and the county that the base is located in doesn't allow pit bulls. So he's kind of stuck in a hard place here, trying to take care of his family as well as his pit bull, who's part of the family.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and part of the argument against them, and I think it's the right approach, is that, as we discussed last time I was on, the whole one of the biggest points of the Lost Dogs was really that every dog's an individual, and you could say some general things about one breed or another, but you can't make a judgment about individual dogs, this and those things. You have to meet each dog individually and determine what it is. There's great pit bulls and there's lousy ones. There's great poodles and there's lousy ones, and you have to go dog by dog. And that's a much better approach. If you don't need to ban a specific breed, you just need to have a dangerous dog law, where if there's a dog that is causing problems, or there's a dog that's not being cared for or responsibly managed, that people can register complaints, and then law enforcement could take action. But, whether that's a pit bull or whether that's a black lab or whether it's a German shepherd, you can deal with a bad dog, and that's all you need. You don't need to ban a specific breed, because there's thousands and thousands of pit bulls out there that are great dogs that will never cause a problem in their life. And you're just sort of, making these generalizations that don't help anyone.
Yeah, and for humans, we have these laws in place when you have a bad human, and at least from my experience, my commentary for the moment is a lot of times when there's a bad dog, you don't have to look much further than the human. All I got to say.
Yeah, almost always.
That's my commentary. It doesn't necessarily reflect the thoughts of the management here at Pet Life Radio. All right, well, we're going to take a quick little break, and then we'll come back with Jim Gorant, talk a little bit more about what he's got going on, and talk more about the book Wallace. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Sit. Stay. We'll be right back after a short pause. Well, 4 to be exact.
Introducing the new Bret Michaels Pets Rock collection exclusively at PetSmart. I created it for the pets that rock your world.
Shop the Bret Michaels Pets Rock collection and celebrate PetSmart's 25th anniversary with up to 25% off thousands of items on the PetSmart site. Plus free shipping on orders of $49 or more. Go to PetSmartDeal.com. That's PetSmartDeal.com. PetSmartDeal.com.
I don't make any decisions about who to hire without going to Angie's List first.
You'll find reviews on home repair to healthcare, written by people just like you.
With Angie's List, I know who to call, and I know the results will be fantastic.
Angie's List. Who you can trust.
Go to angieslist.com/rights and get 25% off any subscription. That's angieslist.com/rights. WRITES.
Hi, I'm Lisa Smith-Putnam, the host of the new and exciting show, Your Pets, My Dogs, here on Pet Life Radio. Your Pets, My Dogs will feature celebrity interviews, we'll talk to everyday pet owners, and more. Listen, I am here to entertain you each and every week, right here on Pet Life Radio. Again, that's Your Pets, My Dogs. I'm your host, Lisa Smith-Putnam. Your Pets, My Dogs. Your Pets, My Dogs.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. This is your host, Tim Link, and I'm here with author and best-selling author, actually, Jim Gorant, talking about his latest book, Wallace, the underdog who conquered a sport, saved a marriage, and championed pit bulls one flying disc at a time. Now, Jim, tell us a little bit about this second comment here, saved a marriage. How in the world did Wallace go about doing that?
Well, it was Clara and Rue were a young couple, and they went through. I don't want to give away too much of it, but they went through some struggles that there were reasons for, and Wallace was sort of the one consistent connection point, the one thing that they held in common through all of it, and sort of brought them together and helped them get through it until eventually, it could resolve itself. So. It wasn't direct action. He didn't sit down on the couch with them and ask them what their problems were, but sort of indirectly he influenced them, and part of that too is just the same general way in which animals, I think, help all of us. Is that it forces you outside yourself. It forces you to think about others and to, by the necessity of caring for them and walking them and feeding them and all the things we do with them, they force us to. Think about a bigger picture and think wider and be more compassionate. And so I think in those ways, as well as the more direct way of that, maintaining a sort of bridge there through tough times, he had a big impact on their life.
Yeah, and I think animals definitely have a way of doing that. If we just take a step back as humans and look to see how our animals in our life are living, it's a great way that we should be living, because they do provide that constant happiness and calmness, and provides us a purpose, and they fulfill purposes in their lives to help us out as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, when putting together the book, and you've got it out there, it's doing well, I know that. What do you hope that the readers will walk away with once they read the book? What would be some of the key points that you think that I've accomplished what I've meant to accomplish?
Well, for me, and this was the same with the Lost Dogs, where this question always came up, I don't set out to necessarily make a point or try and change anyone's mind. My inspiration or my starting point always is to tell a good story, like we were saying earlier. I want to entertain people. I want them to pick the book up and have a hard time putting it down. And when they do put it down, I want them to be thinking about how quickly they can get back to reading it. So I'm really about telling a great story and keeping people, involved in the story. So that's always my goal. And I think that works better in the end. It's part of what I think made the Lost Dogs powerful was that it was not written by someone who was necessarily an animal welfare advocate who was trying to make a point. And the neutrality of it sort of made it more powerful, and I think that works in Wallace as well. At the end, the way it's written and the way what the story demonstrates, hopefully you will come away with a different opinion of pit bulls. You would come away with a better understanding of these breed-specific bans and why they're not effective, and as well as being entertained. But it's never my point to do those things. Hopefully that's an effect of it, but not the only reason it was done. So. For me, it's always first and foremost to sort of tell a good story.
Yeah, and you did a great job with it, and I appreciate you stating that, because it's true. Because often, I work, obviously, and I'm a writer and author, and I work with animals all the time, and I always find it challenging to try to step outside of it and either tell a good story or take a neutral perspective instead of such a direct, hardcore perspective. And I think it's what you've done and told a great story, told Wallace's story as it needed to be told, and there are going to be some great after effects that just came out of it naturally.
Yeah, and certainly there's different kinds of writing, and sometimes you're writing for a specific purpose, and sometimes here at the magazine I will write, will write an essay, and that essay is to make a specific point, and that's a different kind of writing. But when I'm taking on these books, I'm always hoping to to do some good storytelling is my first objective.
Well, you did a great job with it, that's for sure. Going back to, we talked about The Lost Dogs and its overwhelming success, a best-selling book, and it's still having an impact out there. When writing the book, Wallace, how did that compare, or was it more challenging? Did you have any expectations of, oh boy, I'm a bestseller now, I got to write another bestseller? Did any of that play any impact on how you put the book together?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I felt that pressure. I didn't want to follow up the last one with something that was not as good. They're very different type of books. I mean, the Lost Dogs was a very sort of hardcore journalism book. It was a ton of research and interviewing confidential sources and identifying those sources and combing through court materials and tons of interviews. The book covered such an expanse from the behind the scenes of the whole Vic investigation then to following 4 or 5 of these dogs through their rehabilitation process, all with different people in different parts of the country. So it was just so wide-ranging and so many people involved, whereas, Wallace was much more direct. It was Clara and Rue were like the 2 main sources, and certainly I talked to a bunch of other people that crossed paths with Wallace through time, but it was a much more direct story, and, it was one dog followed straight through from beginning to end. And so in terms of the writing and the research, it was a simpler book, but I definitely sort of felt the pressure to follow up with something that was worthy of what the last one was, and hopefully, do as well.
Yeah, and I know it's doing well. It's a great book. Everybody will definitely pick up a copy of it, and we'll tell all the listeners a little bit more about how to find out about the book in a moment. With the book coming out, let's go back to The Lost Dogs. I mean, now that book's done and dusted and you did your research, et cetera, are you still keeping up on all that? Do you do any more research in those areas? Do you ever get any inklings of how the book has impacted everything that transpired with that event?
Well, I'm connected to a lot of the people who have adopted the dogs through Facebook, so I get updates that way, and The Lost Dogs has its own Facebook page, and I try and pass those updates along whenever I can, and just like Wallace also has Wallace the Book on Facebook as well. And, everyone's doing really well. I think of the 47 dogs they saved, I'm a little shaky on the numbers now, I can't remember them all so well, but I think it's 7 of them have passed for various reasons. Which leaves about 40, and of those 40, I think over 25 have been adopted out or in homes, and the remaining ones are at best friends and doing pretty well. And a lot of them are hopeful there to be adopted yet still too. So it's been an overwhelming success, from that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting to try to keep track of all that and find out where they're at. And of course, I'm a member of Best Friends as well, and so I get the updates periodically on that. And they all do seem to be doing well, adjusting, and getting healthy mentally and physically. And it's big kudos. And I think the book, The Lost Dogs, went a long way of helping bring that awareness, further awareness to the details behind the event.
Yeah, I hope so. And it did. I know. Not just the book, but the entire Michael Vick case, brought a lot more attention to the problem of dogfighting, and it had an impact in law enforcement to prove that these cases, they were good cases. You could get a conviction, and they were popular with people, and that you could also, as a gateway crime, you could bust a dogfight, and you would inevitably bust a bunch of drug dealers and gun traffickers and people who are up to a lot of no good in other areas. So there's definitely an increase in the amount of investigations and prosecutions that came out of the Michael Vick case. And also, I think it helped to change the perception a little bit too. It seemed like the first step in turning the tide for pit bulls, that the first time they were looked at as a victim in these crimes instead of, an accessory to them. And it seems to me at least that there's been some change in perception. And I think the bad people who still want, a badass dog are still attracted to pit bulls, but I think on the other side of it, regular middle-class families are also not as afraid of them as they once were, and adoptions are up amongst those people as family dogs, and so that's positive, and hopefully that can continue and help continue to even more so change the perception.
Yeah, and I see those trends slowly changing, and I know the book had a great impact on that because they are family dogs. I mean, that's pretty much how they were bred, to be part of the family, take care of the family, and they're wonderful with children. So
yeah, incredibly loyal.
Yeah, so I think it's gone a long way of doing that. So what else we got going on, Jim? Any new projects you want to tell us about, or any new things we should be looking for?
Well, that's it for now. I've got a few ideas for where to go next, but unfortunately, it's a hard time finding time. I do have this job at Sports Illustrated, which seems to only get busier, as I suppose it should.
Yeah.
But we'll get there one day. But for now, we're just working on this. It just came out last week, and we're trying to get the word out and let people know it's there, and hopefully make it a success.
Absolutely. And when you're ready for your next dog book, let me know. I've got some great ideas, so I'm glad to share them with you.
There you go.
Well, everybody, pick up a copy of the book. It's Wallace, the underdog who conquered a sport, saved a marriage, and championed pit bulls, one flying disc at a time. You can go to the website, which is wallacethepitbull.com, or go to the Facebook site, Wallace the Book. Find out more about what's going on, friend them there, and keep track of everything that's happening. It's a wonderful book. Jim, congratulations on the book, on the success, and we look forward to speaking to you again here on Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's always a good time.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end of this show. I want to thank everyone for coming to the show and listening. Thank everyone for listening to Pet Life Radio shows in general. I want to thank once again Jim Gorant for being on the show today. And thank you to the sponsors and producers for making the show possible. To find out more about me, Tim Link, and the other guests that I've interviewed on the Animal Rights Show, and pick up on the blogs as well, you can go to PetLifeRadio.com, click on the Animal Rights icon, and read the blogs, catch up on the shows, download this episode. And while you're there, make sure you check out all the other hosts and shows on Pet Life Radio. That's PetLifeRadio.com. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for the show, please email me. You can email me at tim@PetLifeRadio.com. It's tim@PetLifeRadio.com. And I'll do my very best to answer your questions, entertain your comments, and bring on the people you want to hear the most onto the show. So until next time, write a great story about the animals in your life. Share it in a blog, article, or in a book. And who knows, you may be the next guest on Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have a great day.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.